Prepare for the return of the Alternative View Conference, AV5. Humanity versus Insanity, a conference that will make a difference. Featuring the most challenging and thought-provoking speakers from across the globe. May the 16th to the 18th, 2014. Staverton Park Hotel, Daventry, Northamptonshire. AV5, the Alternative View.
Thank you very much, Daisy. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah. Great, okay. And thank you so much, Ian, for inviting me. It's a real privilege to grace the AV stage, and I'm having a great time as well, so thanks for letting me be here. I'd also like to say well done to British Gas, who I think organised for a wedding party to spend the entire night chatting outside my room last night. It worked, but thank you all very much for getting up to hear about electricity, gas and water meters. Wow, you guys are pretty committed. So this is where the rubber hits the road, folks, and I'm going to try and get your blood pumping in a minute. So I hope you're ready. And there's going to be a one-question quiz with a very special prize, which is a great documentary into the facts about the smart grid. So stay tuned for that. As Daisy said, my name's Mike. I run a little organisation called Stop Smart Meters UK, which I founded at the beginning of 2012 with a colleague, Dr. Elizabeth Evans, to basically warn the public about what is tantamount to a Trojan horse that's being prepared for all of our homes and small businesses. I actually first became aware of some of the dangers associated with smart meters before I became aware of smart meters. And that was thanks to being at a talk by a certain individual by the name of Ian R. Craig, where I met an anti-wireless radiation campaigner, and she gave me a heads up into the dangers of wireless technology. And I was pretty shocked by what I heard. And when I researched it more for myself, I was horrified. This is a real blind spot for people, so that woke me up to the dangers of wireless technologies, which are, proliferating into our lives at a rapid rate. And it was some months later that I became aware of smart meters and realised that these things were going to hugely up the ante in terms of electro-smog in our homes and our environment. But unlike maybe mobile phones or your Wi-Fi router or whatever it might be, you can't switch these things off. You can't manage the electro-smog in your home if you have a smart meter in it. So I realised then and there that I had to, rather than just safeguarding my own domain, I had to get a bit more proactive on this issue and try and help other people see the facts about this. So I set up a website at stopsmartmeters.org.uk. Was anyone aware of our campaign before today? If you could raise your hands for me. Great. Oh, brilliant. Okay, thank you. So we've been curating that for about 2 years. We have, because we kind of need to, a Facebook page and a Twitter account. But importantly, this hosts our Don't Smart Meter Me facility, which is basically a little engine that you can use to plug in your name and address and automatically send a notice of non-consent and a notice of liability to about 75 contacts within the energy industry and government, saying that you do not consent to having a smart meter in your home, and any liability for harm that comes as a result of one being on your home or near your home will be theirs to bear. So that's been signed now by thousands of people. We've served over 100,000 legal notices. So there's something you can do about this. And I'll make the point now that smart meters are not mandatory. You have the right to refuse them. And while I would encourage everybody to visit the site and send notice, you can even download a PDF to complete and just send to your own energy provider refusing consent. I think that we all need to get a little bit more proactive on this issue, as you'll see. So, Over the next hour or so, I'll talk you through what smart meters are, some of the basics, and why they pose a problem to our health, our privacy, our safety, our grid security, and our bills. I'll be spending quite a bit of time on health, particularly. We'll talk about where this is possibly all going, and I'm also going to give you some ideas for what you can do about it. So given this is the alternative view, I thought it was only fair to present the industry side of the argument first, and I'm actually going to do my level best to get you excited about smart meters first, so that they don't get the chance to say I didn't at least try. So, where's my new friend Indigo? Where's Indigo? And Jenka. Okay. Are we going to do some Winnie the Pooh stoutness exercises? Yeah? To get the blood pumping? Come on then, right. You heard the little lady. If we could all just stand on our feet for a moment, please. Sunday morning. This is just what you needed, right, after a Saturday night in the bar. Okay, so time to shake a leg.
At British Gas.
Oh.
At British Gas, we're revolutionising the way our customers see their energy. We're upgrading you to smart meters, so you'll get accurate bills without submitting meter readings. And you'll get a breakdown of what you're spending on things like heating and lighting. With smart meters, you'll never see energy in the same way again. British Gas. We do more to look after your world.
Well done. Thank you all. You may be seated. I tried, but I'm sorry, I'm still not excited about smart meters. Thank you, Indigo. And also, what was it you told me on Friday night? Never buy anything you see on an advert. That's the future, folks. It's looking bright. It's looking indigo. So they tend not to show the meter in the adverts, funnily enough, because they are dreadfully dull looking. These are the North American and Australian style ones, which means this is happening, a little bit out of breath, this is happening all over the world right now. This is a globally synchronised initiative, which means that whilst the UK government is pushing it, and Ed Miliband and Ed Davey would like to take credit for it, it's the people sitting behind them lobbying and pulling the strings that are really driving this. So the reason there's been so many installed to date in the UK, there's more than a million already that have been installed just in this country, with another 52 million to come, is that the energy companies are telling people your meter needs upgrading. And I was just told by one of the camera guys that there was a Radio 4 episode yesterday pushing this as an idea for the poor to be able to save money. I mean, it's scandalous what lies are being told and how people are being misled, but we'll cover that. I've been told perfectly good meters are being thrown away by people within the industry. A lot of the people that get in contact with us are in the industry and say that this is just wrong. Worldwide, the smart meter market is expected to reach $500 billion or so by 2050. So this is big business. The designs of smart meters vary from country to country, but they fundamentally do the same thing, and that is they constantly monitor and measure how you're behaving at home and what you're doing at home via your energy use and your water use. And then they communicate that private information of yours to the nearest cell tower almost in real time through a government gateway known as the DCC, and finally that information then gets passed on to your energy or utility provider. To do this, smart meters contain two microwave transmitters, one that communicates with cell towers using pulsed mobile phone signals. The other is designed to communicate with a new generation of smart appliances and devices via pulsed Wi-Fi signals. So when your old washing machine and TVs die, their replacements will likely be smart, which means they'll have RFID chips in them that are able to communicate with the smart meter and tell the smart meter and anyone that has access to that data how you're using it. There is one benefit in this for you. You get to see what energy you're using in a little bit more detail. via a panel on the wall known as an in-home display unit. But a £15 energy monitor from Amazon would do the same thing for you without transmitting that data wirelessly to your energy or utility provider, and without giving the energy provider the means to remotely disconnect you or control your appliances, which we'll talk about as well shortly. So let's look at why these things are bad for our health. This is a big concern because even if you have withdrawn consent for a smart meter, some of your neighbours might not have done. This is a British Gas smart meter, not quite as sexy as the advert, right? To the human ear, it's silent. But to every cell in your body, it sounds like this. Okay, you get the message. So what you just heard was my gigahertz HF35C microwave meter showing 1 pulse of microwave radiation. It's intense pulses. As you could see, the meter was going off the scale often there. And that's being emitted every 2 seconds from a British Gas smart meter. So I have a recording of a BG rep saying that smart meters don't emit microwaves. You have evidence to the contrary there, and when I threatened to complain about what she told me amongst a load of disinformation, she said, you know what, just remember they do emit microwaves, but less than a mobile phone, which is also not true. In just a single 24-hour period, smart meters can expose you to up to 190,000 pulses of microwave radiation, 365 days a year. The one you just saw emitted 43,200 pulses per day. This graph is by a senior nuclear policy researcher and lecturer at the University of California in Santa Cruz. And it shows how one smart meter can expose you to between 160 and 800 times more radiation than a mobile phone. In a block of flats, there is nothing stopping there being a bank of 40 or 50 smart meters sitting on the other side of a wall to a baby's crib. This radiation is cumulative. And as I mentioned, unlike a mobile phone, you can't switch them off. Not that I think mobile phones are a good thing. So why is that a problem? Okay. As I've said, smart meters emit 2 kinds of radiation, both sitting in the microwave band. Mobile phone signals and Wi-Fi signals. There's also an issue of dirty electricity, high voltage transients that come about with smart meters, which, even if wireless is disabled, would still be present. But I'm not going to talk about that today because I don't have time. But if we look at just the effects of mobile phone signals and Wi-Fi signals, this is a brain scan that was published in a peer-reviewed journal in 2011 called the Journal of the American Medical Association, or JAMA. And it shows an adult brain before and after 50 minutes exposure to a cell phone. And what it shows is changes in glucose metabolism in the brain. So a cell phone is capable of altering your brain chemistry, amongst other things. The worrying thing about this is that while the cell phone was switched on, or mobile phone was switched on, it wasn't making an active call. This is the phone at rest, occasionally pinging at the nearest cell tower. And this was also an adult brain. Children's brains are a lot thinner. And specific absorption rate testing was never tested on kids. The model they use is the size of a standard US Army personnel officer, who tend to have quite thick skulls. No offence. This was taken from the European Reflex project. It was a €100 million study, and it compares 3 COMET assays, which is a test that's used to determine DNA damage, very commonly. The first one here, it was the control. The second one shows X-ray radiation exposure, and the third one shows cell phone exposure damage. The study was done by 12 European research institutes across 7 countries, and what it shows is that 1,600 chest X-rays can cause the same level of DNA damage as 24 hours of cell phone use. You probably won't use your cell phone for 24 hours in one sitting, but like I say, the effect is cumulative. The interesting thing here is that X-rays, which sit at one end of the electromagnetic spectrum, are known to cause ionisation, and microwaves, which sit at near the other end of the spectrum, don't cause ionisation. It's non-ionising radiation. So why are the effects so similar? I'll cover that in a moment. But Reflex concluded that the results confirm the likelihood of long-term genetic damage in the blood and brains of users of cell phones and other sources of electromagnetic fields. It's funded by the industry as well. This slide shows DNA damage to the brain cells of rats exposed to just 2 hours of Wi-Fi for 35 days, 2 hours of Wi-Fi over just over a month. School children now in the UK are facing the prospect of having a Wi-Fi emitting iPad or laptop or some other kind of tablet sitting on their laps for 12,000 hours of their school life, going home and being in environments where they have smart meters, deck cordless phones, Wi-Fi, maybe even a smartphone in their pocket for the rest of the time. This is a crime in progress, folks, and we need to start eliminating each of these sources, not adding to them.
Sorry, I couldn't see the source of that data.
This is Kasari, Bahari, Kumar, response of 2.5 gigahertz radiation exposure on rat brains, the International Journal of Radiation Biology. This is your average sample of human sperm under normal conditions with no exposure to a cell phone. The sperm are energized, they're mobile. On the other hand, when you expose them to 12 hours of cell phones, they've got clearly marked reduction in energy, reduction in motility. They're clearly not getting the business done that they need to get done. We have a presentation on our website by Dr. Deborah Davis speaking at the National Institute for Environmental Health, where she talks about the effect of having a cell phone in your pocket, if you're a guy, for 4 hours or more. It can reduce your sperm count by 50%. It's our future, folks. This next clip is from Take Back Your Power, Josh Del Sol's documentary on smart meters, and it's the first of its kind because it shows video on how smart meters affect human blood cells.
While industry has failed to do any peer-reviewed studies on smart meters and health effects, a growing body of independent research is now starting to accumulate.
In our second set of tests, we're using the smart meter. Before the exposure, we see the same thing as we saw in the first samples. Normal cell walls, fairly separated and looking healthy. So after 2 minutes of exposure in front of the smart meter at about 1 foot away, we see a totally different story. Sample 1, you can see a lot of degradation in the cells. The cell walls have been broken, and you see changes in the cells which are called mycoplasma. It shows a mutation to the cell. In the second sample, we see a different type of degradation to the cell membranes. You can see a corrugation here. This is called bottle cap formation, and it's known that this occurs due to oxidation or exposure to free radicals. So this third subject, when we did her sample, she had to be pulled away from the meter after 45 seconds because she complained about an increasingly severe headache. And here you see a phenomenon called rouleau, where the red blood cells are stacking up, which makes it very difficult for the blood to deliver oxygen to the tissues as they would be their normal function. Every single one of these is a degradation. Every single one of these shows a trauma to the blood cells. And that came from something, and the only variable was the smart meter.
What's going on?
Okay. So what formal scientific studies have been done on wireless? I already mentioned one to the gentleman that asked for the source. Quite a few people, you know, I've heard often say, you know, there's been no studies that have been done that have shown wireless is harmful, which is just not true. There's over 5,000 studies now showing how wireless and other sources of artificial electromagnetic fields can harm us. We just need to make the effort to go and find them because they're not being shown to us by the media, which to a large extent is reliant on broadcast technology, AM and FM towers and TV towers. This is an interesting piece of information discovered by Professor Henry Lai at Washington University, which showed that 70% of studies funded outside of the wireless industry, so independently, showed harm from wireless technologies, whilst only a third that were funded by industry showed the same, which is obviously quite curious. If we look at another study, this was done by Dr. Leif Solford of Sweden's Lund University, and what it showed is the blood-brain barrier leaks when exposed to electromagnetic frequencies used in wireless radiation. The worrying thing about this isn't just that the blood-brain barrier is our last line of defense against toxins entering the brain, but this is, we're seeing an increase in the proliferation of EMFs at a time when we're seeing a proliferation in toxins in our environment, air pollution, GMOs, pharmaceutical interventions, mercury fillings, pesticides, herbicides, etc., aerosols. Some will say, well, okay, fine, it's a good study, but wake me up when it's been replicated. This was the replicate. This was the 16th replicate in a series of now more than 20 that have looked at exactly this issue and shown exactly the same. I don't know how many replicates are needed, but the leakage here happened at 5,000 times below what's apparently the safe level. So what does the military know about this, given their dependence on radio frequency and microwave technologies? Well, this document was published by the Naval Medical Research Institute in the early 1970s, and it drew on more than 2,300 studies, which reported functional changes, pathological changes, degeneration of body tissue, EEG changes in the brain, not surprising given we're bioelectrical, and even structural changes in the brain as well. So they've known about this for quite a long time. Why hasn't something been done? This is why. This is a formally classified US DIA document, also from the early 70s, into radio frequency radiation and microwave capabilities of foreign communist countries. And there's a section dealing with the biological significance of the radiation and another dealing with anti-personnel applications, which are radio frequency or microwave weapons. And as shocking as that is, there's another standout paragraph, which is this from page 7. If the more advanced nations of the West are strict in the enforcement of stringent exposure standards in relation to radio frequency radiation, there could be unfavourable effects on industrial output and military function. The Eurasian communist countries could, on the other hand, give lip service to strict standards but allow their military to operate without restriction and thereby gain the advantage in electronic warfare techniques and the development of anti-personnel applications. So this is basically prima facie evidence that our health and that of our children has been sacrificed on the altar of the military-industrial complex. Not that this means the telecoms industry thinks it's a done deal, of course. They continue to do their level best to ensure that the case on wireless dangers stays firmly shut. This is the state-of-the-art £50 million Li Ka-shing Cancer Research Facility in Cambridge. It was named the Li Ka-shing Centre after the chairman of wireless telecoms giant Hutchison Whampoa Limited. He's so concerned about cancer that he provided £10 million in funding for it. Hutchison Whampoa is the largest Asian investor in the UK. It's invested more than £14 billion in 3G wireless infrastructure here. Not that I'm wanting to pick a fight with cancer research or anything, or necessarily suggesting that this is an absolute scandal, but I do wonder why the vast majority of research into cancer is dedicated to detecting, treating and operating on cancer, rather than looking at the causes of it. Why is that? Especially when you see trends like this. Thanks, Ian, for the slide. And what I'm about to say shouldn't divert attention away from other potential causes of autism, which I believe, that there are other factors that could play a role in this. But when you see how autism has risen over the last 40 years, and you look at how it's tracked the rise in regular microwave and radio frequency exposure, you have to ask whether there's a direct link here, and that question is not being asked. Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt, who I'll talk about later, believes he can now predict autism incidences in children based on the amount of exposure to electromagnetic frequencies that pregnant mothers get where they sleep. So some people say to me, we're surrounded by microwave radiation. At a cosmic level, surely a bit more can't hurt us. Well, it is true that we're exposed to natural levels of background microwave radiation, but those background levels are tiny in compared to what is emitted by cell phones and smart meters. Under natural conditions, we typically have exposure to around 0.000000000010 microwatts per square metre. In contrast, the wireless standards adopted in the UK allow up to 9 million microwatts per square metre for each individual wireless device that you have. That level was set by a private industry group known as ICNIRP, the International Commission for Non-ionising Radiation Protection. I think it's called that because the only thing they're protecting is the radiation. To put the amount of radiation into more meaningful context, if we said that the natural background microwaves measured the same as a standard piano keyboard, so this is the exposure value and not the wavelength, then the amount allowed to penetrate your brain by every wireless device that you're using would reach all the way to the sun and back again, 4.5 million times. The so-called safety limits allow 900 quadrillion times the amount of microwave radiation that we evolved with to penetrate our heads. More will enter, though, if you're a child, because your skull is thinner, or if you're wearing the device in your lap or next to your heart, where there's a rib cage and less bone density. So the exposure values can be 4 to 8 times higher still in those areas. And testing was never done for those areas either. So it's important to bear in mind as well that we're exposed to information-carrying microwaves today, which are more harmful than unmodulated frequencies. So one of the reasons we have this problem is because of how Public Health England views the human brain. The method they employ for dosimetry at a macro level basically involves placing a temperature probe inside this rubberized US Army personnel officer's head, a liquid-filled dummy head, and seeing how long it takes to heat that probe up by 1 degree centigrade. And if it's more than 6 minutes, it's safe. Which is basically like saying cigarettes are only harmful if they burn you. Your head is not a bucket of salty, sugary water, but I can't speak for the people running the Health Protection Agency. For starters, this line of thinking basically takes no account of non-thermal effects that happen outside of heating. And secondly, there's a random movement of ions in a bucket of water compared to the controlled movements in your brain. So because of this, and shortly after the publication of the excellent Bioinitiative report in 2007, the UK standards were voted out of date and obsolete in an EU parliamentary motion. The UK's refused to acquiesce, and the standards are still used today. And I know that people here probably aren't the biggest fan of the EU, but every blind squirrel finds a nut occasionally, right? So this is really worrying, given how little we know about the workings of the human brain. And to illustrate this, I've got some fascinating audio to share with you from a Radio 4 interview from some years ago with Professor Brian Ford. Ford believes that he's identified intelligence within our cells. What you'll hear maybe for the first time is a recording of our brain cells talking to each other. You've heard the racket that smart meters make. Have a listen to your brain cells trying to communicate to each other.
And so for the very first time, you can actually hear the utterances that one nerve cell is making to another. And this rather haunting sound is almost like, I think, seabirds on a cliff talking to each other.
Let's hear it. So what's going on?
Well, we always tend to teach these days that thought and data processing in the brain goes on at the synapses, the junctions between brain cells. I don't believe that. I believe that thought is going on within the nerve cells. The nerve cell is the most highly evolved cell that we know, and it cannot just be switching on or off like a transistor.
So what are the implications for things like stem cells, which everybody's talking about in terms of stem cell research?
The stem cell, for example, viewed in my model, is seen as a human in microbe form. I don't see us, you see, as bodies divided up into cells. I see us as great communities of independent, almost free-thinking cells that come together to produce the effect that we know of as human life. Well, Jim, you've gone suddenly almost speechless, which I have to say is uncharacteristic for you.
Well, no, I mean, just, you know, after a description of what is the nature of life, it's a question of where you go next, really. Well, I think the answer is Gary Richardson, sport. In fact, but...
oh, we can't get into the truth. Truth herniation. Let's go to the sport. Now for the archers. Right, so I'm going to show you this as well. I wasn't sure whether to include this, but something Simon Welsh said yesterday kind of clinched the deal. So this is a very early stage human embryo. I've actually extracted it from a report by John Evans, who's a former Cambridge mathematician. And Evans developed his own computer modelling software that he used to create 2D and 3D models, and he had an interest in embryology and morphogenesis, form-creating fields. And when he was examining this image, he realised that whilst there's very few discerning features, there's no organs to speak of, there's no limbs. We have the very early stages of what goes on to become the nervous system. We do have an outline of a head and the body, but very little else. He realised that these little nodules here, somites, that go on to become our ganglia in our nervous system, he thought they looked like antennae. So he decided to create a virtual copy, plugging in all the variables, the length, the width, the distance apart, the chemical composition, etc. I believe he even created the appropriate chemical composition for the amniotic fluid. And he applied different musical frequencies within his software and scales to see what shapes he got. And if you're familiar with cymatics, this is where sound can produce form in the real world. You lay a speaker on its back and place a piece of wood over the top, shake some salt on it, and then apply frequencies. Shapes will be created in the salt. So sound can generate form in the physical world. And he essentially, I guess one way of putting it is he played the somites kind of like a chord on a guitar, like Darren last night. And you'll never guess what popped up. We have a head, we have eyes, we have a forehead, you can see a mouth, a jawline, a thorax, esophagus, we can see the outline of shoulders, arms, collarbones, right down through the digestive tract. We can see the makings of what would become the lower limbs, reproductive organs, etc. I know it's rudimentary, but this is an extremely early stage embryo that doesn't have any of these features yet. And so this basically suggests that our central nervous system is an enormously complex antenna array that would probably put HARP to shame. And the theory is that as we develop and our cells divide and propagate around the body, this field that our nervous system generates is informing our cells of what to become in the area where they are, so depending on their location within that morphic field. Is anyone familiar with Rupert Sheldrake's work on morphic fields? Yeah, so this feeds into that. And does anybody remember Simon thanking everyone last night for listening him into existence? This is your cells listening your body into existence in real time. And as our cells develop and our nervous system develops, this picture becomes more detailed as we become more detailed. Isn't it beautiful? The people that are microwaving us have basically got no idea what they're screwing around with. So moving on, some people will mistakenly believe that there's no mechanisms for microwaves causing harm as well, which again is not true. The gentleman at the top is renowned cardiologist Stephen Sinatra, MD. He's spoken widely on Wi-Fi as a coronary risk factor and describes RF radiation as the newest mitochondrial toxin. He says that the mechanism for wireless radiation in causing disease, DNA breakdown and pathology is due to nitric oxide disruption. I didn't know what nitric oxide was. But he said that that's how wireless works. It causes enormous oxidative stress, endothelial cell dysfunction and nitric oxide depletion. I've subsequently learned that there's been over 100,000 studies into nitric oxide, the discovery of its role in signalling in the cardiovascular system and central nervous system won its founders the Nobel Prize. Wi-Fi disrupts that signalling. It causes disarray in your body processes. So it doesn't cause ionisation, it causes harm a different way. The gentleman at the bottom is Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt, who I mentioned, of the Klinghardt Academy in Washington State. He has been able to show with people who've come to his clinic with chronic and acute illnesses the presence of inflammatory markers after people have had smart meters installed on their homes. Inflammatory markers in the blood, as well as hormone abnormalisation and neurotransmitter disruption. I borrowed this slide from Professor Martin Paul, which shows how RF EMF causes oxidative stress in your cells, producing something called reactive oxidative species, which go on to produce free radicals, which lead to cell, protein, lipid and DNA damage. I won't read the bottom, but basically Professor Paul says the increase in free radicals leads to inflammation, oxidative stress. The EMF doesn't directly damage the cell, he says. It deranges cellular metabolism. This shows how these fields cause calcium ion channels in cell membranes to leak, allowing external molecules that shouldn't be there into the cell. And that causes the release of ions from storage inside the cell, which causes problems. And this is a phenomenal paper by Dr. Ulrich Warnke, a renowned bioscientist, and he looks at mechanisms for harm as well, but also comes at this from the angle of what it's doing to our bees and our birds and other pollinators. It also lists nitric oxide disruption and redox imbalances leading to cell damage. You can find it on our website. Please do check it out. It's a great paper, and you'll understand just how sensitive the natural world is to frequencies when you've read it. Bees navigate and communicate using electromagnetic frequencies. They're able to detect storms and weather patterns using electrical signals. And our bees are literally getting lost in a toxic soup of information-carrying microwaves. It's not just the neonicotinoids, folks. It's us and our wireless addiction. It's not just Monsanto and Dow Industries, although I don't doubt for a second that that's having an impact as well. I'll come back to this. Maybe the most naive fallacy I come across is that if wireless radiation was dangerous, surely it would have been banned by now. This line of reasoning appeals to an unshakable faith in governments to do no wrong. These are just some of the examples of substances that we now know to be harmful that were previously proven, extensively tested and known to be safe. I don't know how many hundreds of years of denial these things would rack up, but you could add a few more decades at least for GMOs, BPA, artificial microwaves, etc., which aren't on there. So, let's have a look at how the smart grid impacts our privacy. And let's first take a look at what the picture currently looks like.
A simple thought. Converted into nearly 51,000 bytes of data. The multimedia message, or MMS. This particular message is one of 28,000 sent every second into the World Communication Network. It accompanies categories of information like emails, ISP data, weblogs, and voice data. When deciphered, these communications carry with them a pattern, or metadata, that reveal information like the user's number, who the receiver is, the location sent, the date and time of the message, the duration, the amount of data transmitted, and the subsequent cost of that transmission. The average user will have 736 pieces of this personal information collected every day. Over time, this information amounts to the user's digital identity, which is accessible anytime in their service provider's retention period. Verizon withholds this information for 12 months, AT&T for 84, Sprint for 24, and T-Mobile for 60 months. Most individuals will have over 1 million pieces of information spanning the past 45 months already in their provider's possession. A third party owning nearly 4 years of your life. Not only do users pay for the access to information through cell phones, computers, and data plans, but those who partake in the network pay to be unknowing participants in a vast study group. If you use this network, your 4 years of information is extracted and sold without consent, contributing to the nearly $34,000 accumulated every second by the information sector. The specifics of nearly all digital interactions are sold to a variety of entities. Among them are ad servers that assign the individual a demographic based on their digital histories. Once assigned, individualized information is deployed to the user. Location data is filtered into intrusive localized advertising. Facebook likes transform into custom Walmart ads, and search engine results are narrowed to a limited scope. The global internet becomes the personal internet, and information ceases to be information at all.
So that's 1 million pieces of information being collected about us every 4 years right now. And those data points are being fed into the jaws of a world of data analytics that lies at the other end of our credit cards, store cards, smartphones and computers, examining our profiles, examining our lives and habits so that they can be further predicted, further monetized, and further controlled by those with access to it. And as bad as it might be now, wait until smart meters come along and something called the Internet of Things, which I'll talk about in a second. This is a congressional research paper which showed that with smart meters, agencies like the police will have access to data that could be used to track people's daily lives and routines at home, including what and when we eat, when we sleep, whether that sleep's broken, how long we're awake, what our showering and bathing habits are, which appliances and devices we use and when, whether people prefer the TV to the treadmill. This is from a report by Oxford University's Internet Institute, Dr. Ian Brown, that showed it goes deeper still, stating that smart meters can show whether someone has mental health problems or has ever left the children home alone, or both. Think about the implications of that, possibly in a custody battle, which it talks about. This patent application shows that it goes even further. It's an application from Verizon for something called a smart TV detection zone, which will be able to determine who's sitting in front of the TV, what they're doing, what facial expressions they're using, what kind of mood they are in, and whether they're arguing. So based on the fact it's able to detect who's in the room, when this hit the news, this was being sold on the basis that if you're having a row with your partner, the smart TV detection zone will know and be able to serve up a tailored ad for marriage counselling. This piece by Onzo, a data analytics company, reckons that your smart meter will be able to help predict falls. So if you're using your appliances differently, they say that you might be suffering from an illness that's a marker for a potential urinary tract infection. And they say that illnesses can be precursors to falls. So if the British Gas smart metering team thinks you're due for a fall, they can send intervention. But of course, that suggests that it goes way beyond the mandate of the energy company. There's all sorts of industries heading towards the smart meter data, but they're just not talking about it right now. If you're worried about where it goes, rest assured that there is awareness of this gross invasion of privacy at a government level, and they are acting. This is an announcement by California's CPUC, the Utilities Commission, saying that they'd adopted new rules to protect the privacy and security of customer data from smart meters by giving away access to it. They say that our action today enables authorised third parties to use your private information, expanding third-party access to your electricity usage information in the hope that this data rape would stimulate market interest. So who's in the market for your data? Well, former CIA Director General Petraeus is one. This is him saying that smart meters would revolutionise clandestine operations just before, ironically, information about his private life destroyed his career. The NSA is so excited about the flood of new data that's coming, they're building a $2 billion data centre in the middle of the desert to sift through it. But hey, you've got nothing to hide, right? You're not doing anything wrong. If people say that to me, I encourage them to read a book. Can anyone tell me who this is? Daisy, congratulations, you've just won a DVD. You were first on the buzzer, well done. Anne Frank had nothing to hide. She was a sweet, innocent 13-year-old girl when she started writing her journal, which ended just before she was taken to Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, I believe. And I found out recently that in the mornings and evenings, Anne Frank's family had access to water, a gas stove, and some electricity to power a light bulb. The Frank family would not have lasted a day in the smart grid. So if someone says to you they have nothing to hide, history tells us that that might not always be the case, whether you're doing something wrong or not. What is it they say about knowing your history or being doomed to repeat it? So let's talk briefly about grid security. Okay, by putting a smart meter into our homes, what the energy companies are basically doing is putting our energy and water supplies onto the internet. That's our entire domestic and small business energy, and in some cases water supplies. So it's one thing to connect your computer to the web, and if you do so, I imagine some of you are probably using a firewall or an antivirus software to protect it from, you know, what is effectively a Wild West on the web. It's kind of how we like it, I think. And if your computer does get compromised or infected with malware, as it can do, then it's only your data that's at risk. With a web-connected smart meter, it's your energy supply that's at risk. And as I mentioned earlier, this rollout's happening simultaneously across the globe at a time in history when cyber warfare is on the increase. Patrick Henderson yesterday talked briefly about Stuxnet, a virus designed by the US and Israel to target Iran's nuclear power facilities. It's still out there, folks. And with this smart grid, there's going to be 440 million new entry points into the energy grid, which is no big deal if smart meters are secure, but they're not. This has been shown time and again. We reported earlier this year that an off-gem smart meter had been successfully hacked with ease. 2 years ago, a group of ethical hackers in Germany showed that a smart meter could be breached really easily and provide information on who was in and what they were watching on TV. And if a smart meter can be breached that easily, then your power supply can be disconnected that easily. And I know that there's people out there doing this and who are interested in it because there's dedicated search engines like this one called Shodan HQ, which helps malintents basically seek out unsecured devices online and attack them. I had a look at this last week, and the number 2 most searched for item is industrial control systems. Despite one former CIA director rubbing his hands about the smart grid, GCHQ have said that smart meters represent a strategic threat and will allow hackers to target individual families and leave homes open to terrorist attack. And if you want to get the lowdown on those, get one of Ian's DVDs. We've seen James Wolseley, this former CIA director, going on record saying that this isn't a smart grid, it's a really, really stupid grid, pointing out how vulnerable it makes the grid to attack. And we've seen reports from the FBI saying that smart meters are creating opportunities for huge amounts of energy theft, which is basically going to be socialised in higher bills for people. We've even seen Lockheed Martin, the stalwart of the military-industrial complex, warning that smart meters will allow China to hack the US power supplies. Can anyone see where this is going? This was such a big concern to us that in 2012 we partnered with cybersecurity firm David Chalk Inc. To challenge publicly British Gas to let us hack and launch a cyber attack on one of their smart meters live on TV. This would have given them a great opportunity to prove how safe their smart meters are. The challenge hasn't been accepted yet, but we keep it open. So our security supply is pretty important. None of us can live without water, and very few of us can live without power in this modern age, especially in winter. So I was pretty surprised to learn that not only are smart meters hackable, they're only designed to work down to minus 10 degrees. Some parts of the UK reached minus 20 a few years ago. And these things are designed so that if they malfunction or get compromised, they'll fail your supply to off. So there's some absolutely crazy decisions being made here in relation to how they're being designed and specified. So given the profound risks, why is the industry still recklessly ploughing ahead? Are we all going to save an absolute shed load of money with smart meters? If you've been following the issue prior to this morning, you might have heard about how the smart meter programme is a colossal waste of money. If it comes in on budget, it will cost the UK £12 billion. That's £400 per home and small business. For an estimated saving, if you have 2 smart meters, of just £23 a year. So if you believe your energy company will give you that saving back, it will take 16 years for them to, for you to see it. And I'm not convinced that the energy companies are going to show us that saving. Neither is Germany, who commissioned a consulting firm to independently examine whether there was any truth in the rumours of smart meter savings. They concluded there isn't. And pilot tests across the world have consistently shown the same, that smart meters don't produce sustainable energy savings. This report by ComEd showed that 91% of people with a smart meter don't save a penny, even when financial incentives and punishments are offered. It's devastating to their plan. The report showed 0 statistically different results in usage compared to what's usually used. So 9% of people can save energy, but 91% of people don't. That's great news if you're an institutional shareholder in big energy who haven't fled the big energy market yet for some reason. And if you do try to save money, there's a chance you'll get ripped off by your supplier anyway. That's what happened to this man in Australia who was ripped off by his energy supplier with a smart meter, and his bill doubled. And when he threatened to blow the whistle, they tried to pay him off. The BG smart meter I showed you a few minutes ago, I filmed that at a restaurant in London when the restaurant owner had contacted me saying, I've been persuaded to have one of these things in my restaurant by British Gas. They told me it would save me money. My bill has doubled and I'm on the verge of bankruptcy. Please help me get rid of it. She had no idea about the health risks there as well. This is from a one-year report by Toronto Hydro in Canada showing that after smart meters were installed, bills went up in 80% of cases, often by more than 50%. The bottom line here is that energy companies, many of them in the UK, are publicly listed corporations, and they're beholden to their shareholders. No publicly listed energy company I know of would actively seek to introduce a piece of technology that would reduce their profits. And that's why we're seeing the likes of British Gas running ahead of the official wider programme, lying to customers, trying to get these things in place, and water companies are doing the same. I wanted to just touch on water quickly and the issue of fracking, because each frack well uses between 5 and 20 million litres of fresh water per well. In the southeast alone, where I live, there's talk of 36,000 wells being drilled. So The water is contaminated when it's used for fracking. With the highly toxic frack fluid that's used, you cannot recoup it. So we're looking at the prospect, just in the southeast, of using 72 trillion litres of fresh water from our water supply, and that will be gone for good. And that's, in my view, why we're seeing the rollout of water meters. It's in preparation. So where might all this be leading us? Well, there's a number of possible outcomes here, but whichever way you look at it, the smart meter programme is a Trojan horse. One place this is definitely going is to the Internet of Things. You may have heard about smart cities, smart motorways, smart this, smart that. Well, the next step is the Internet of Things, which essentially involves placing radio frequency identification chips in everything. IBM's former CEO, Sam Palmisano, is quoted as saying that they're now at a point where they can make every product, every service, every process and every human network attached and aware. IBM is behind the company Positive ID, which used to be called Verichip, which is the human microchipping company. The Internet of Things, then, is on the cards, and this is how the EU are pitching it.
It's crazy that we doubled our use of energy in the last 50 years. We can't keep this up.
1,400 transport units, 520,000 kilometres per day, 1,750 hours of travel.
What do I need? Milk, eggs, bacon, fish sticks, condoms. Oh, chewing gum.
Yes, hello? No, I still need to order bandages. Okay. There aren't any more needles. Where's the... I'll put you through. Oh, and I still need to do this.
Don't you have the feeling we're standing still all the time? Why has it become part of our lives?
Isn't it strange that roads are getting longer? Shouldn't evolution make the world more efficient?
And while we're standing still, we pollute even more.
Why can't we focus on people instead of procedures?
What if objects start to sense and communicate, becoming tools to help us deal with complex and urgent situations?
What if all objects were interconnected? What if there was an Internet of Things?
With the Internet of Things, applications are infinite. We could be able to monitor our transport better, winning precious time at any turn. Way beyond smart logistics as we know it.
With an Internet of Things, we could be able to monitor from a distance. Instead of spending time in a hospital, people could actually live their lives.
Emptying our carts would be a thing of the past. It would also limit forgetfulness. We wouldn't even need a shopping list. We could easily ping our refrigerator at home to tell us what's missing.
If we want to be smart about energy, we could let energy be smart about itself. With the Internet of Things, we could be able to manage our world differently, adding a new dimension to the Internet as we know it.
The Internet of Things, part of our future.
I don't have time to comment on all the deceptive sales messages that were contained in that short clip, but you can see how this future doesn't contain any privacy, can't you? Whilst the EU is cheerleading this into existence, they're doing so on behalf of the real driving force behind the Internet of Things, which in my opinion is IBM. If you watch TV, you might have seen adverts that have been running for years now, where people will pop up and say, I'm an IBMer, I'm building a smarter planet, and they say very little else. IBM is pushing the smart concept in every major industrial sector, pretty much. And that is a little more than worrying to me, given IBM's track record in spearheading invasive population tracking technology. As you may know, IBM created Hollerith, which was used by the German government in the 1940s to profile and identify sections of the population. And I'm trying to figure out how this advert for Hollerith would have been interpreted at the time. We've got this all-seeing eye at the top, an illuminated pyramid of light shining on the town below, and this lamppost here, because it seems to have been resurrected for pushing this Internet of Things, and knowing IBM's central role in pushing out population tracking technology in the 1940s, I'm at a loss as to why this imagery is being invoked again for population tracking in 2014 and beyond. Is it a coincidence, or some kind of sick joke, or something else? You know, Hollerith was used by the Nazis to profile and identify undesirables. The smart grid and this Internet of Things is going to profile all of us, all of the time. This troubles me. And as Pippa King, who's here, she runs Against RFID in Schools, told me Cisco and other tech firms and financial companies are now sponsoring Internet of Things to schools. In the UK, they're in 8 schools now. So we've basically got corporations moving into schools and basically trying to tee up this industry for the future. And the Internet of Things includes you. I don't know whether you saw that elderly couple had Wi-Fi coming off them. That's microchipping, folks. This is David Cameron's carefully orchestrated attempt to bring the Internet of Things into the public's attention back in March this year. But make no mistake, this has been a long time coming. If you're familiar with Ian's research into the subject, he introduced me to the work of Marion King Hubbard and Zbigniew Brzezinski. I don't know whether you saw Brzezinski's grand chessboard in the sky on that clip, but Ian's researched the technocracy movement and the emergence of a state where every unit of energy will be tracked in order to safeguard a balanced load. This stems back to the 1930s, but the reason why technocracy was put on the back burner, so to speak, is because the technology wasn't there to enable it. It is now. So let's talk about deep profiling. At the end of Smart Meter's big promise to put an end to the gas man calling round once a year, there's a data mining operation that would make George Orwell die of jealousy if he was alive today. This is an example of how easy it is to determine what appliances you're using, and this is without smart appliances. So you can see your fridge, your oven, when you're using stove, etc., and different appliances. As mountains of personal information about how and when you use energy gets fed into data mining algorithms, the first in line to exploit that information will be energy companies. Medical companies are in line too. They're already enjoying many of our private medical records via the Care Data program. I hope you all opted out of that. Health insurance companies, welfare agencies, you name it, they're all looking to bid for this information about you. And HMRC, as some of you may know, are in the process of trying to sell your tax data into private hands. That's valuable private information about you, and your smart meter data is next. It's not going to be used to save you money either. This is going to be used by other people to make them money at your expense. Another example of who might like this data is your bank, who now believe they've got the right to ask whether or not you eat steak before they lend you money that they've created out of thin air for a mortgage. And I can see a point in the near future where if you want a mortgage or health insurance, you're going to have to give up records of, say, the last 3 years of smart meter data or to your lender before they agree to a loan or to insuring you. And if you're not prepared to do that, you'll either get refused or you'll have to pay a premium. So knowing as well how much of our lives are going to be recorded, I'm concerned about what kind of impact that's going to have on a society that's already fearful of authority. So You've got much more variable rates coming too. This is known as time of use billing. And as you've just seen, even if you don't have smart appliances, the smart meter can still tell what devices and appliances you're using, for how long, what time you usually cook dinner, and therefore when it's best to charge you. And that's not just my opinion. Ofgem, who have repeatedly denied that there are plans to introduce compulsory time of use billing, published this report in February where they sell the idea to the energy companies on no fewer than 8 occasions, saying that suppliers can basically reward themselves for smart meters with time of use billing, where they vary how much you pay for your energy on a minute-by-minute basis. So that's taking us to a situation where, unless you can spend every waking moment, and sleeping moment maybe, watching your smart meter display to figure out when it's cheapest to bath your kids or put the oven on for a Sunday roast, your utility bill will rise. Or you'll need to hand over sovereignty of your appliances to the energy companies so they can control them for you. And in this document, that's called active demand control. This is on the cards. Ofgem's talking about it. There's headlines prepping you for it. Smart meters have this feature designed into them. It's coming. Okay, cyber attacks quickly and internet access controls. Call it a hunch, but something tells me that if we make our energy system, our healthcare system, our transport system, and our economy more dependent on the internet, and then you suddenly see an uptick in cyber attacks, which have been predicted, then I can't see a better scenario for pulling a coup on a free internet and introducing mandatory internet licensing. I don't think it's going to be easy for them to do that, but we all know that there's a desperate attempt to put controls on the web. Anyone here who runs a website, and I know a few of you do, are already under threat now because of David Cameron's esoteric website filter. Let's talk about carbon taxes, because smart meters are potentially central to enabling this if it's going to happen, or energy quotas. Tim Yeo MP, who leads the UK's Energy and Climate Change Committee, and others like him, have called for this kind of system where we're given an energy ration and be told to make do or be fined. And if you think that rationing and penalties are a bit too far, for starters, how would they implement energy rationing, given that everyone's got different energy needs? It would be impossible, right? Well, it wouldn't unless you have a smart meter in place. Then that creates the art of the possible. And take a look at this document by OpenEU, a think tank, where they lay out 4 paths that the EU can follow to achieve what they call a one-planet economy, which sounds great, doesn't it? It features arguments for personal carbon taxes, incredibly draconian population control measures, government-controlled media, so some things aren't going to change, the legalisation of voluntary and assisted suicide, because if the Internet of Things has robbed you of all vestiges of privacy, then you might just want someone to throw you under a bus. And when we reach what they call the breaking point, then they say, as a backstop to control consumption, smart metering technology is increasingly used to cut off customers from non-critical energy use, along with civil and criminal penalties for exceeding rations. So not only is IBM's Hollerith making a comeback, ration cards are too. This is a much bigger subject than what I've got time to cover today, but I'd urge everyone to look at Rosa Corrie's presentations online about Agenda 21 and get familiar with how the environmental movement has been hijacked by private interest groups, and how the terms biodiversity and sustainable development have basically been turned into weapons against us. Most ironically of all, this smart grid really doesn't provide us with a route to sustainable energy. It's quite the opposite. By connecting everything to a network, you make everything energy dependent. That creates energy vampires, where all of your appliances and your devices are consuming energy on an ongoing basis in case the network needs to connect with it or interrogate it or control it or switch it off. That vampire energy, by the way, is going to be paid for by you. My final point here is what I call transnaturalism. I don't have time to cover this as much as it really needs because it's a very big problem that we're facing. But we looked at how our bees are being impacted. What's the solution that's being proposed to that problem?
Five years ago, these fields were a barren wasteland. Honeybee colonies were collapsing, and pollination had all but stopped. But all of this has changed now, because bees are back. But wait, what is this? You might think these are ordinary bees, but let us take a closer look. These little marvels of advanced robotics are second-generation new bees. Far superior to their nature counterparts, they have been successfully implemented all over the world. Completely solar-powered, a new bee requires very little downtime to recharge. Using real-time triangulation technology, each new bee knows which part of the field has been pollinated, maximizing efficiency and yield. Unlike standard bees, new bees are fully equipped to fight their natural enemies. As soon as a predator approaches, the new bees are alerted, release a fast-acting insecticide, and neutralize the threat in a second. Nothing can harm them. New bees do not tire, require minimum maintenance, and are produced for a fraction of the upkeep cost of normal bees. They are easily recycled, replaced, and activated. New bees blend in perfectly with nature and are programmed not to harm us. Soon you'll be able to purchase a whole new colony and activate it in your fields. New bees, the future is already here.
It's almost too well done. A lot of people think Greenpeace is now working with big agribusiness, but in case you missed it, it's a very well done warning about where we're potentially headed. I do have one small problem with it in that there's no implied blame placed on artificial EMFs and wireless radiation. Is that an accidental oversight? I don't know, but there is certainly no heat on big telecom on this issue at the moment. The main thing to take away from this is that this kind of innovation is real. One organisation that's working on artificial robotic patentable bees is Sussex University. They hope to upload the consciousness of real bees to an artificial one by next year. Bee deaths aren't bad news for everyone. There's going to be a killing to be made in GMO, biotech, artificial intelligence companies, as well as new tax revenues for the services that these creatures provide. My question is that if we create a planet that's incapable of supporting bees, and our answer to that problem is creating artificial ones, what happens when we create a planet that's incapable of supporting humans? And as a society, we're getting sicker, not healthier, so consider what path we're on. And I'd recommend everyone checks out Greg Nicoletos' presentation from AV5, where he talks about the transhumanism movement that's seeking to create avatars, human avatars, and make immortality a reality by 2045 by uploading our consciousness to a mainframe. And if you think that sounds crazy, it's because it is. It's absolutely insane, but it's being worked on. So, with all that said about these things, I've got some good news. And the good news is we can all do something about this. Unlike a lot of things that we're having to deal with today, you have a say in this. You know, the energy companies can only install smart meters, which are key to all of this, if you let them in and your neighbours let them in through your door and you consent. So the first thing that I would encourage everyone to do is to withdraw that consent formally. You can do it via our website, just a letter to your energy company. It needs to be no more than one sentence saying, stick your smart meter. But please remember, your energy company may well try to trick you. It is commonplace. They are lying. They're saying there's laws that aren't. No one, either now or in the future, can force you to have a piece of technology in your home that constantly exposes you to harmful radiation and which spies on you, whether they introduce new rules or not. Send the energy company a letter refusing, and if you want to monitor your energy, great. Buy a £15 energy monitor on Amazon that doesn't hand over sovereignty and all of your private data to third parties who are going to use that data potentially against you. After you've safeguarded your own place, talk to your neighbours. This isn't difficult, by the way. You know, something's missing though on your street, and that's the alternative view to what they're being fed by the mainstream. You can change that. You're all here. All that's left now is for you to give your neighbours a heads up. And I promise you, this is where it's at. On your street is where it's at. And you won't wake everyone up. But, you know, I say you can lead a sheep to slaughter, but you can't make them think. But you will win round some people. And those that you don't, if you give them a leaflet and they still go ahead and do it, you've planted a seed there that will sprout when their energy bill rockets after they've had a smart meter installed. And that will potentially bear fruit later. Write to your local paper, call into your local radio show, show people that you care about this subject. And if you want to get more proactive, organise a screening of Josh Del Sol's documentary in your local community centre. I'm hoping Daisy will do one, given she's won the DVD. There's 2 screenings in the UK over the next 2 days, one in Bristol tonight, one in Totnes on Tuesday. This is a great way to open people's eyes to the smart meter issue. Everyone I've showed it to has loved it, and we'll happily do a flyer for you and advertise it for you, but you're the boots on the ground now in your community. We need you guys to start acting. I'm sure you are already, but on this subject. We've got a rare opportunity where we and our neighbours are being asked for our consent to let a piece of technology in our lives that will change it for the worst. This is the biggest open goal we've had for a long time. I've offered you a few ideas of what's worked for me and what we can start doing to make positive change. My question is whether we will actually do something rather than waiting for others to take action. You know, it's no good being awake if we're no more effective than those who are still asleep. And whilst we might be under threat on many, many levels here by reckless, psychopathic, soulless corporate agendas and private interest groups, the future that we're going to get is the one that we're going to create, so let's start creating it now. Thanks.